Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Tessa's horrible update on the identity of the Mariah mystery man. The identity of the mystery man will be revealed by Tessa Porter, who will also give an update on her investigation into Mariah Copeland's terrifying business trip. It's also time to discuss Tuesday's YNR show since Melody Thomas Scott's character Nikki Newman will spar with Jessica Walton's character Jill Abbott. The unfortunate thing is that when Jill first arrived at the Newman ranch, Nikki and Jill got along well. Jill graciously acknowledged that Catherine Chancellor would have been happy with Nikki managing her business after Nikki thanked her for selling Chancellor to Victor Newman. However, the politeness was abruptly interrupted when Victor stopped Kane Ashby and Nikki openly asked Jill if she would assist her. As supporters are aware, Kane is determined to acquire the businesses from the Abbotts, the Newmans, and possibly the Winters, the three main powerhouse families in GC. At every opportunity throughout their talk, Jill brushed Nikki off. She initially emphasized that she had no actual influence over Kane, and when Nikki emphasized that Jill was aware that Kane was Aristotle Dumas before anyone else was, Jill dismissed the notion that Kane was as evil as Nikki believed. Victor was at society when Phyllis Summers came in and sat down at a table with him. Throughout their entire chat, the two argued, with Phyllis insulting Victor and Victor using mind tricks to try to persuade her to reveal Kane's scheme. When Victor eventually made the decision to go, Nick Newman entered after he paid the tab. In an attempt to persuade Phyllis not to work for someone as vicious as Kane, Nick sought to support and uplift her as much as he could in place of insults. Particularly in light of Kane's plans. Nick assured his ex that she was enough and that she could pursue her career further, better. However, Phyllis pointed out that, in contrast to him, she does not have a wealthy father who could suddenly offer her ideal position. To Nick's annoyance, Phyllis eventually stormed out of society and demanded that he stop meddling in her affairs. When Victor returned home, he saw Jill with Nikki. With a smug expression, Victor pledged to change Nikki's mind when she conceded that Jill would not change her position on Kane. On the other side of town, YNR recaps for the Tuesday, October 7th show mentioned that Tessa prevented Sharon Newman from leaving Crimson to go to the airport for Los Angeles to see Noah Newman. She and Daniel Romalotti gave a lot of information after returning from the in-depth analysis of Mariah's work trip, which had left her shaken. To Sharon's dismay, Tessa revealed that when she showed the hotel staff Mariah's photo while on a work trip, the barman recalled her. He disclosed that Mariah connected over cocktails with an older man named Will Hensley. Additionally, Tessa discovered that Mariah and Will were drinking, kissed, and went upstairs. But what transpired next appears much more unsettling than Mariah generally interacting with an older man. Sharon was horrified to see Will's picture and thought he might have used her daughter. Nevertheless, Tessa interrupted, saying that since Mariah had told her that she had attempted to murder an older man that evening, Tessa could reasonably believe that the man was Will, who did not harm Mariah, quite the contrary. Although it's difficult to determine whether Mariah and Will were intimate, Tessa was alarmed when the staff noticed that Will had checked out in the middle of the night and didn't want to wait until morning to leave the hotel. He was also deeply shaken while alive, and he departed in a hurry. The following morning, Mariah used contactless checkout, so the staff was not aware of her condition. Sharon was reminded by Tessa that Mariah had mentioned that she started drinking to cope with the trauma she had experienced at the hands of Ian Ward. Based on her recollections of Ian, Tessa pointed out that Will is roughly the same age as Ian and has the same physical type, so maybe something about Will made Mariah act in the way she did. According to YNR recaps, Daniel had a more sinister theory. Daniel speculated that Will might be seeking revenge on Mariah for the event because he did not die. Is a potentially terrible situation for Mariah and Tessa, as well as anybody else in their orbit, imminent? According to spoilers for The Young and the Restless, Daniel thinks Mariah may be in more danger than everyone realizes. Tessa's update on Mariah's horrifying mystery man encounter shook Genoa City to its core, not just because it pulled Sharon and Daniel into a nightmare that felt eerily familiar, but also because the sinister threads of the past seemed to be weaving themselves right back into Mariah Copeland's fragile present, leaving everyone around her unsettled and bracing for what was coming next. When Tessa Porter sat Sharon Newman down at Crimson Lights and finally let the words tumble out about what she had uncovered during her digging into Mariah's business trip, Sharon felt as though the floor had been yanked out from under her feet. The revelation was not just about some random fling gone wrong, it was about the chilling identity of an older man, Will Hensley, whose sudden appearance and disappearance from Mariah's orbit left a trail of suspicion, dread, and unanswered questions. Tessa explained that when she had pressed the hotel staff for answers, a bartender remembered Mariah vividly, her hair, her nervous smile, the way she seemed eager to drink but also distracted, almost as though she was trying to drink away something gnawing at her soul. That bartender revealed the terrifying detail that Mariah wasn't alone, she was seen sharing cocktails with Will, a man much older than her, one whose presence felt out of place, one whose connection with her spiraled quickly from casual chatter to drinking heavily, to flirting, to kissing, and then to them heading upstairs together. The revelation hit Sharon like a bullet. Her daughter, already scarred from the years of manipulation and trauma inflicted by Ian Ward, seemed to have walked straight into the arms of another predator, another man whose intentions could not be trusted. Sharon's breath caught when Tessa showed her a photo of Will, an image pulled from a local database, a grainy but chilling reminder that danger doesn't always come with a warning sign. Sharon's first instinct was horror, her protective mother's instinct screaming that this man had taken advantage of Mariah, used her vulnerability against her, and dragged her back into the kind of nightmare she had barely clawed her way out of years ago. But Tessa, though visibly shaken, cut in with a detail that complicated the entire picture, because according to what Mariah had told her in a shaky, half-confessional way after she returned, she had tried to kill an older man that night. Tessa pieced it together. The man Mariah had referred to could very well have been Will Hensley. If that was true, then Will wasn't Mariah's predator, at least not in the straightforward sense, but possibly her victim. The room seemed to spin for Sharon as she realized the implications. If Mariah had lashed out violently, pushed to the edge by memories of Ian Ward, then she might have crossed a line that none of them could ignore. And yet, the story didn't end there. Tessa's voice trembled as she revealed the most disturbing part of her findings. Will didn't stick around. In fact, he had checked out of the hotel in the middle of the night, frantic and shaken, leaving before dawn without explanation. He didn't wait for the morning, didn't speak to anyone, just vanished into the dark, alive but rattled, carrying with him whatever had happened in that hotel room with Mariah. The following morning, Mariah, pale and distant, had used contactless checkout and slipped away too, leaving behind a trail of speculation and whispered gossip from the staff who sensed that something very wrong had gone down between the woman and the older man. Sharon's stomach twisted into knots as she recalled how Mariah had once confessed to numbing her pain with alcohol, a coping mechanism born from Ian's torment. Was this another manifestation of that same wound? Had Will's resemblance to Ian, his age, his build, his presence, triggered something deep inside her daughter, something dark and uncontrollable? Tessa thought so, pointing out that Will looked eerily similar to Ian, which might explain why Mariah had spiraled the way she had. But Daniel Romalotti, who had been quietly absorbing every word, suddenly leaned forward with a theory that chilled them all further. What if Will hadn't just walked away? What if he was planning something? What if he had recognized Mariah not just as a troubled woman lashing out, but as someone tied to Genoa City's powerful families, someone whose connections made her a ripe target for revenge? Daniel's speculation cut through the fragile calm like a knife. What if Will hadn't disappeared, but instead had been lying low, plotting his next move, seeking payback for whatever had happened that night? The idea that Mariah's impulsive, possibly violent encounter had ignited a vendetta against her was too horrifying for Sharon to process, but the logic was undeniable. Daniel's voice grew firmer as he insisted that this was more than just a bad night of drinking gone wrong. This had the makings of something much larger, something sinister that could reach beyond Mariah and threaten Tessa, Sharon, and anyone else who got pulled into the orbit of this mess. The danger wasn't just hypothetical, it felt imminent, the kind of storm you can sense building long before the thunder rolls. As Tessa recounted every detail, Sharon's mind also wandered to another battlefield erupting across town, because while she was grappling with the terrifying possibilities surrounding her daughter, Nikki Newman was engaging in her own war of wills at the Newman Ranch. Jill Abbott had arrived, initially extending polite words and warm acknowledgments of Nikki's role in running Chancellor Winters, even graciously noting that Catherine Chancellor would have been proud to see Nikki in charge. But the fragile truce shattered quickly as old rivalries and new agendas came to the surface. Victor Newman's looming presence made things worse, especially when Nikki, desperate to shield her family from Kane Ashby's scheming, openly pressed Jill for support. Jill, however, refused to be cornered, brushing Nikki off at every turn. She dismissed the idea that she had any control over Kane, and when Nikki brought up Jill's early knowledge of Kane's true identity as Aristotle Dumas, Jill coolly countered that Kane wasn't as malevolent as Nikki painted him to be. The tension thickened as Victor, ever the strategist, inserted himself into the fray, his smug expression making it clear that he would eventually twist Jill to his will, whether she liked it or not. Meanwhile, over at Society, Victor's chess game with Phyllis Summers reached another volatile boiling point. Their conversation was sharp, full of barbed insults and subtle manipulations, with Phyllis lashing out at Victor's arrogance while he attempted to bait her into spilling secrets about Kane's plan. Neither won the round, but the clash left Phyllis rattled, particularly when Nick arrived and attempted to play the role of comforter. Nick's heartfelt plea for Phyllis to see her own worth, to avoid tethering herself to a man as dangerous as Kane, seemed noble, but it backfired when Phyllis, resentful of his privileged background, snapped back that she didn't have a father like Victor to hand her opportunities. The bitterness drove her to storm out, leaving Nick frustrated, Victor smug, and Phyllis more vulnerable than ever. Back at the Newman ranch, the power struggle persisted, with Jill remaining firm and Nikki caught between fury and dread as Victor promised that he would change her mind. Yet, despite the high-stakes clashes of Genoa City's power players, the most haunting storyline still lingered in the shadows: Mariah's night with Will Hensley, the unanswered questions about what really happened, and the creeping suspicion that something darker was brewing beneath the surface. Sharon's heart ached as she processed Tessa's account, torn between the fear that her daughter had been used and the even more terrifying fear that her daughter might have done something irreversible. The specter of Ian Ward loomed over everything, a ghost of the past whispering through the present, making it impossible to separate trauma from reality, guilt from danger, or past wounds from future threats. And as Daniel's words echoed in Sharon's mind, that Will could be seeking revenge, that danger could be circling closer than any of them realized, the screen of Genoa City seemed to shimmer with foreboding. Because whether Mariah had been the victim, the aggressor, or both, the truth about that night was going to explode eventually, and when it did, it wouldn't just change Mariah's life. It would pull Tessa, Sharon, Daniel, and anyone connected to them into a spiral of secrets, lies, and vengeance that could alter the entire balance of power in Genoa City forever. The fallout from Tessa's revelation about Will Hensley rippled across Genoa City like a shockwave no one was prepared for, and while Sharon Newman tried desperately to cling to her composure in the wake of the horrifying update, the truth was that she was unraveling on the inside. Every word Tessa had spoken replayed in her mind like a broken record: Mariah drinking heavily, kissing Will, going upstairs, and then confessing afterward that she had tried to kill an older man that same night. That detail gnawed at Sharon more than anything else, because it meant her daughter might be living with guilt too heavy to bear, or worse, that she had ignited a chain of events with consequences none of them could control. As Sharon sat in crimson lights with Tessa and Daniel, she wrapped her hands around her coffee mug for warmth, but the shiver that ran through her body wasn't from the fall chill outside, it was from dread. What if Will comes back? Sharon finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but the weight of the question made both Tessa and Daniel fall silent. Tessa swallowed hard, her eyes flicking between Sharon and Daniel, as if hoping one of them had an answer she didn't. But Daniel, who had been unusually still until then, leaned forward, his gaze sharp. If he does come back, it won't be for closure. It'll be for revenge, he warned grimly, voicing the very fear that had been gnawing at all of them. The unsettling part was that Will Hensley wasn't a random stranger pulled out of thin air. He had a history, one that Tessa had only begun to uncover during her frantic search for answers. His name had surfaced in whispers, his reputation checkered, his presence in certain cities tied to shady business deals and women who spoke of his charm that quickly turned toxic. He was the kind of man who knew how to manipulate, how to read vulnerabilities, and how to strike when someone was weakest. That made Sharon's stomach twist, because if Mariah had lashed out at him, if she had somehow fought back against whatever he had tried to do, or whatever she had perceived he was trying to do, then Will might view her not as a victim but as an enemy. Men like Will don't just walk away, Daniel muttered, shaking his head. If he left that hotel shaken, then he's had months to stew on it. And if he knows who Mariah is connected to, he might see this as an opportunity to take something from her, or all of us. The room seemed to grow heavier with every possibility raised, and Tessa, though rattled, tried to pull them back from spiraling too far into paranoia. We don't even know for sure that he wants revenge. Maybe he just wanted to forget the whole thing, she said, though even she didn't sound convinced. Sharon turned sharply toward her, her protective instincts burning. Men like Ian Ward wanted to be forgotten too, until they didn't, she reminded her, her voice breaking. They wait until you've convinced yourself you're safe, and then they strike. I'm not going to let that happen to Mariah again. The mention of Ian Ward was like reopening an old wound. The scars of what he had done to Sharon's daughter would never fully heal, and the idea that someone resembling him, someone with his same physical presence and manipulative nature, might have been the catalyst for Mariah's terrifying night was enough to make Sharon feel as though history was threatening to repeat itself in the cruelest way imaginable. While Sharon wrestled with this private terror, the rest of Genoa City was consumed by its own battles. Over at the Newman Ranch, the sparring match between Nikki Newman and Jill Abbott escalated with each passing minute. Nikki had approached Jill diplomatically at first, hoping to appeal to her sense of loyalty and legacy, but Jill wasn't biting. She remained firm, almost dismissive, in her stance about Kane Ashby, brushing off Nikki's concerns as paranoia. What Nikki didn't realize was that Jill herself was harboring doubts she didn't want to admit. Jill had always prided herself on being tough, a survivor, someone who could spot a con from a mile away, but Kane had a way of tugging at her defenses, making her believe he was worthy of second chances, even when all evidence pointed to the contrary. Victor, standing by like a predator ready to pounce, could see through Jill's excuses. With his trademark smug grin, he leaned on Jill in a way only Victor could, insisting that eventually she'd see Kane for what he truly was, and when she did, it might already be too late. Nikki seethed at Jill's stubbornness, her voice rising as old grudges resurfaced, because it was impossible for these two women to be in the same room for long without their decades of rivalry bubbling to the surface. It wasn't just about Chancellor Winters, or Kane, or even business, it was about control, about who wielded the influence in Genoa City, and about who Catherine Chancellor's true heir in spirit really was. But while the Newman Ranch boiled with its own brand of chaos, Victor slipped away to society, only to butt heads with Phyllis Summers. Their conversation was nothing short of explosive, the kind of verbal sparring that left sparks in the air long after one of them walked away. Phyllis, ever defiant, hurled accusations at Victor about manipulation and control, while Victor countered with his own brand of psychological warfare, trying to bait her into revealing what she knew about Kane's schemes. Phyllis refused to crack, but the encounter left her rattled, particularly when Nick Newman arrived and attempted to rescue her emotionally. His pleas were heartfelt, his words designed to uplift her, reminding her that she didn't need a man like Kane to define her success. But Phyllis, raw and defensive, fired back about the privilege Nick had grown up with, cutting him down by pointing out that he didn't know what it was like to claw his way up from nothing. The bitterness in her words lingered long after she stormed out, leaving Nick frustrated, Victor smug, and Phyllis more alone than ever.